Welcome to One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. I'm your host, Dr. P, Dr. Wayne Pernell, the outfluencer and your powerful presence mentor. Today, I have a special guest. This is a gentleman that I met when we did our TEDx in Farmingdale. Dave Chemetzky was one of the speakers, and he has such an interesting story that I decided that I would bring him on to One Sharp Sword. We'll look at how he has taken his life path to cut through to what matters most. Dave, welcome to One Sharp Sword.
Hey, thanks a lot, Wayne. I appreciate being invited on and connecting again.
Yep, you are welcome.
Yeah.
You've got some stuff, some stories to share with us. We're going to talk about your path, P.A.T.H. We're going to talk about your rising phoenix, which is a great big thing. And you created a new word that I can't wait to share with our audience. And then a little bit later, as we continue our talk, we're going to talk like a pirate. Not really. It's just that you have a bunch of R words, and so so, we're gonna talk about some of the R stuff going on with you. Dave. Start by talking a little bit about the path and what that was, what that is for you. I mean, you've been a speaker, you've been a mentor of leadership. You work for a major company out in New York, and I don't know if you're allowed to say what that is, and then talk a little bit about what you're doing and what the path PATH actually stands for.
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, so it's been a busy year. Last year, between the TEDx talk and everything else, I've actually used the coronavirus to really retool some stuff. So to answer your first question about path, I've been mentoring, coaching, and volunteering under my coaching piece, which is called On the Path New York .com, and that's one of the email addresses where you can reach me. But what that's done is it's given me a lot of resources to help and assist other people. When I first started creating it, they were like, "Well, what's a cool catchphrase? You always want to catch something." And I was like, "The path. We all are on our path." And as Ram Dass says, we walk each other home. And for me, PATH stands for personal attitudes towards happiness. And, I just build it from there because really that's the basic goal. What we all want to be part of is being happy, even though it's not a location, it's not a place, it's a state of mind.
Happiness is a state of mind. You didn't always have happiness. You had some pretty low times. I don't know if you want to go into talking a little bit about that, or your bounce, or where found happiness and how you carry that forward now.
Well, it's all intermingled, right? At the end of the day, well, and what I'll do is I'll start bringing up my one of my first bounces is going through a divorce, and anybody who's gone through a divorce, it's not a fun situation. The at that time I had a daughter who was less than a year old as well as a 3-year old, and under the circumstances of the divorce, it definitely wasn't very comforting. Uh, all the information I was finding out. Well, that being said, I was sitting in a conference and I heard the poem that I talked about during my TEDx talk, "Still I Rise" by Maya Angelou. And even though that doesn't mention about the phoenix, I started getting images in my head about the phoenix rise, how we rise from our ashes. And this is way before the path came in. And I was like, wow, yeah, I need to rise. I can't let this be my defining moment. I was still younger than I am now, of course. I was in my mid 30s, and I'm like, all right, I need to figure it out. I need to figure this thing out. And that's what it was. I needed to rise from my ashes. Hearing that poem and made me start seeing that spark, the ignition to rise, renew myself, and to find resiliency.
That's awesome. And that's really your message these days is how do we all become a little more resilient? Now, along the way, you've worked with individuals, you've worked with couples, you've worked with parents. You want to talk a little bit about that, and I don't know if now is a great time to bring up that fun term that you coined. I
Yeah. So, uh, so I have been working for the past 5 years with people. I do a lot of volunteer work. So there's always put myself into opportunities to help people. And I'm still working in corporate America. And at one point, I was traveling the country training people on how to identify counterfeit medicine. So as I'm doing this, I started working with larger and larger groups on just the mindset, the mindset shifts, and finding where people rely on past performances. Right, that's how we all decide what we want to do. And going through life, you all go through challenges. As we know, life is not a straight line; it's more of a squiggly line. And this past year, I went through a challenge where I attempted to try to hurt myself, even though I knew all the right resources. I wasn't like that gym membership we all have that we don't go to the gym. But I then retooled and recalibrated my life and created this word, Cluberty, as part of my recalibration and my deciding that I needed to move forward. And I did say Cluberty, not puberty. We do remember that unfun phase. And Cluberty is just as much as an unfun phase, but when you get through it, it's a pretty good experience. And what that is really just talking about, being able to rejoice, knowing where we came from to then figure out where we're going and why we're going in a certain direction. We've all learned things throughout our lives and we make decisions based on that. Not every decision we've made has worked out. And if we retool and reevaluate all the things that have happened and why they've happened, or at least from our perspective, we have the opportunity to then grow and, move things forward. So that was what was Cluberty for me. It's that big reflection point when you get to your life when, like, how did I get here? And I can't be going in the same direction. Like, this can't keep happening. You can't keep going from 0 to 100 and 0 to 100 back. You need to figure out a better balance, or an asymmetrical balance is what I'm been working on lately.
an asymmetrical balance,
Yep.
which is great because people talk about work-life balance or any kind of balance in life, and it's like there's no, if you get to homeostasis, you've stopped growing, really, if you get to this, right? So I love how this ties into path. I love the personal attitudes towards happiness. I wanted to underscore that, and then I wanted to punch that word, just for Cluberty, like Cluberty. It's like you get a clue, you go through this transition, and what you said about it is earlier is, and I'm not sure you said it exactly this way today, but I wanted to make sure that this was part of the message. Is that Cluberty really is about your transition? It's where we decide. Cluberty is really a decision point that our past doesn't have to define us today, and it doesn't have to define our future, right? So, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Our past is always with us. And the Cluberty piece is when we reevaluate uh, why are we thinking the way we think. And that doesn't mean we're thinking something that's wrong. It's really about being able to see what we need to do. I know for me, whenever I go through a challenge, I do a lot of introspection and try to, again, rebalance where I could have done something differently, where my outcomes could have been, more successful. And that's what I do, because that's the balance. And that's how Cluberty came. I was like, when I started reevaluating my situation, and I said, you know, how did I get here? I'm a good guy. And then you start going, okay, this is why I was thinking of things. This is what I was chasing. We don't always chase the things that are right in front of us. A lot of times we'll chase the things that are in our past that we think we want. We still might be chasing, some people still might be chasing that red wagon when you were 7, but it's still affecting to you when you're much older than that. So it's that reflection piece that you're open to about finding out why you're thinking of things. It's a deep dive. It's a powerful process. I've begun working with people on that and talking about it. And it's been powerful for me. It really has released a whole bunch of energy that I didn't need to spend on myself, that I could have focused on different things, much like the TEDx and things like that.
Isn't that funny? And here's what's cool is that I think in some ways our work has great overlap, which is also the reason you're here. I talk about the values journey, and that people change what they value. They may not recognize that, but at some point when you do an analysis, you do look back and you go, well, I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. And what you do is you're challenging people to say, well, then does chasing after that red wagon you never got, does that really serve you? Right. Right. And so letting go of the things that we thought we wanted, I think it's really great. I love the question, how did I get here? It's very Talking Heads of you. It's like, this is not my, right. That's awesome. How did I get here?
And then my other question that I generally ask is, how's it working for you?
Sure.
So when somebody's telling me that they're keep running into the same problem, right? Many people use the words of, oh, I always fail about this. Okay. And how's that working for you? And that, gives them the pause that we need to then think about what's working for us and how can we, fine tune it. I mean, a lot of our lives, if we're able to get the right feedback, we could tune it in the right way.
That's right. And feedback's so important, right? If you have to have a clear outcome in mind in order to be able to tune to get to your next, right? And if you're hanging on to the past, you can't use the feedback on the path. One of the things I say is that, like, a GPS only works if you're in motion.
Yep.
Right. So that's how you use the feedback is, well, we've set in a destination. Now we're getting feedback. And if we've set a destination that is ahead of us and we keep going back to the way we were, you're going to get feedback that says, no, make a U-turn, like turn around and go forward. Right. So awesome.
And that's how the path, I mean, that's that personal attitudes towards happiness, because first you have to know what you want. So it doesn't matter. I can't put anything in what's going to make Wayne happy. So that personal piece and the attitude is that mindset that I can receive and achieve what I want. Then towards the T piece, it has to have the action. You can't only have the good mindset and just sit here and wait for it. You actually have to make it happen. And again, happiness or whatever goal is, that's how it works. It's just that nice flow. I work a lot on flow. And that's where I became, when the obstacles started coming in our path, that's where I came up with the Cluberty piece. I was like, there's still something missing. And that's what it is not only the path, we have the obstacles. I always talked about obstacles, but a lot of people needed to have that name. What is that rock? I needed to know what that rock was. And the rock was Cluberty. For me, there was a lot of issues, unbeknownst to me, just how my life story came through. And those little pieces that you're like, nah, that doesn't bother you. And then you start thinking about it and then deep diving. So I'll share, I had a girlfriend when I was 20 who was killed by a drunk driver. And one of the blocks that I was like, okay, so you got over it, right? I eventually got married to somebody else. But the trick to me is that I was the last person to speak to her, and I told her to go to the party that she went to. Now, she didn't drive. She was on the sidewalk, and she got hit by a drunk driver from a different party or from just driving. I didn't realize how much survivor guilt I had until this year, because I started, as I was deep diving and writing a book, I started reading some of the old poems that I wrote about her passing after she passed. And all of a sudden, I see my eyes are raining. The tears are coming out of nowhere. And I'm like, all right, there's something here. And I needed to find more healing around that. Didn't know that that was one of the things I was carrying with. And once I started doing some more research and deep diving on myself, I knew my resources and I knew how to reach out and repair myself.
Amazing. Amazing. That's, you never truly get over the loss of somebody like that. And, to get to a place of self-forgiveness is huge growth, right? Huge growth. Awesome. Do you want to talk about your, I called it the pirate stuff because it's R, but you have a series of R words that I think do carry you forward, and they could carry our audience a little bit further forward. So some of the some of the main concepts you've got.
So the R is, sorry. So the R is, there's always an R in your heart, in everybody's heart, and right, HEART. So there's always an R in your heart. And what do you choose to do with it? So as I started sitting about it, I like playing with words. I have a couple of programs where we play with different letters, but then I came up with the R, and I was like, wow, there's another set of things that are very passionate to me. There is an R in your heart, and how can we find that within yourself? Actually, so last year, as I shared earlier, I had tried to hurt myself the year before, and as I started putting myself back together, because I had the resources and I found additional resources outside of my own that I used, I decided I needed to recharge myself. And last January 1st, 2020, I joined the Polar Bear Club. And if you don't know what the Polar Bear Club is, it's jumping in the water. And the original Polar Bear Club is in Brooklyn, New York. And you can probably hear from my voice, I'm definitely a New Yorker or New Yorker. And I said, as low as I feel, I have to do something to recharge myself. And I guarantee you, jumping in 50-degree water on a cold day will recharge you, no matter what you do. So and that's what I do. That's what the R's are. So when I think about things, I always try to go back to the R, because you always go back to center yourself within your heart. Our head gets us into a lot of trouble, as you know, that balance between conscious and ego and all those pieces. But the R and our heart will always lead us if we keep to our heart. We know what we want in our heart.
So
and that,
I heard you say a couple of R's.
When I look at words, R words is resilience. I mean, that's where my Phoenix Rise comes from, where we renew ourselves, but it'll always be respectful of ourselves as well as others. You got to ground yourself. So like in the root chakra, reintegrate new pieces of our life, including anything old. There's always ways to make it fun, but also to move it forward. And that's what we really do. It's a resurrection, right? Resurrection, and just keep going forward, because that's what we need to do as human beings. Find that radiance that's within ourselves.
You are on a roll with those R's. That's awesome. I'm writing them down. Here's what I heard. Here's a list of R's for you. Because I wrote them down as you were saying it. You mentioned the word resources multiple times. You talked about recharge. The biggest R for you, I think, is resilience. And then from that is rise. We have renew, be respectful, go to your root chakra, reintegrate, that's where resurrection comes from. And that's where, once you have all of that integrated, you've got the radiance that you can then exude. So those are the R's that came out of you. And I'm not even sure you knew you had so many R's in you.
I'm always enjoying every time I can figure out a new R that I hadn't thought of. I always ask people, so could you give me an R that I might have missed? I'm not a thesaurus and I'm not a dictionary, but it's always nice to reflect and figure out what we could do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. So yeah, have a little fun with that. The R's, the biggest one again, I think for me, for our audience, is resilience. It's about that bounce. We've come through a year of uncertainty. We've all experienced it. That's been around the world. That's not just, a United States thing or a New York thing or a California thing. We've come through a pandemic. Um, and my hand just got bitten by a tiger. No, can you hear that? My cat is in the room with me and very much wants attention. So we'll have none of that. Um, the resilience, though, I mean, really, as we come through this year of uncertainty, every single day, what we've proven to ourselves is that we do have resilience, right? Every single day, we've proven that we can rise above the day that went before. And I think that is a huge message for any of us to remember that, we have this in us. We have resilience. That is a skill, that is something worth practicing, and it's something worth remembering. It's like, I've gotten through tough times before. How am I going to do today? How am I going to do tomorrow? Right? So
Yeah, we
cool.
have to always remember that as bad as it might be, that there are ways, and that was one of the things you need to always remember is to really take that time, take that breath. Right? It's always, if you need to say something, type that email, type that message, but don't send it, and then return back to it. And those are the pauses we need within our lives as well. Is the opportunities to find that resilience. That's why that pauses are really important.
That's great. And this sort of cycles you back to Cluberty, which is like, we may be going through transitions multiple times, right? We may be facing that kind of, darn it, I don't need to let the past define me today. I can choose, right? So that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's the really important part. And then there's with Phoenix. So what I do is I also have like a Phoenix influencer program where I do talk about leadership. So it's, even if think you're at your perfect position, as an entrepreneur, we always try to keep expanding ourselves and growing, because again, as you had said earlier, if there's not growth, it's stagnation, and you want to stay away from stagnation. Even as individuals, you always want to find something to expand yourself, expand your mind, your thinking, because that's what will keep us alive.
Too true. Too true. Um, all right. So you've done some work on success. You contributed to some
Yeah,
work.
so I contributed. I'll show you. There's a magazine that I've contributed to. Oh, there we go. Pull it back for the lighting. Uh,
Perfect.
yeah, Success Profiles magazine. It's a small magazine run out of in Arizona. My friend Brian Wright, and he asked me to, would I write some articles? So I've written about 5 articles, and then I had an interview, which I'm willing to send anybody who wants a copy of it. The interview, as well as the articles about the path, about all the things that I've written about, and that's, it's a lot of fun because it helps pass out a message that not necessarily everybody has or wants. And once you start reading it, you then go, okay, I can look at it differently. That's where, in the background, you'll see my peace, love, and bring a bat. That's exactly, you can talk about your peace and love all you want, but at some point you need to find what your passions are. You need to find where you want to take a stand and what you really want. If things are working out great for you and everything's great, great. Then, but you should still grow and listen to other people's points of view and find out. Maybe there's another great person like Dr. Pernell who will, see it differently and be an outfluencer and be able to explain that. It's just, when you hear things like that, it just charges you and helps recharge, and you can review another piece.
That's awesome. So I wanted to point to the sign that's behind you. It does say peace, love, and bring a bat.
Yeah.
And when I first heard that, I'm like, peace, love, and bring a bat. Like, that's kind of violent. But really, this is about show up with your passion, right? Show up being willing to take a stand for your passion. And for you, I mean, having your baseball bat was part of your TEDx talk, and it really did allow you to speak to passion that way. So I love the lotus flower. Like, for the listening audience that can't see this, it's peace, love, and bring a bat, and it's a person who's meditating. It's a silhouette of a person who's meditating and in front of a lotus flower.
And if you look, so it's over my shoulder, you can see they're also not only sitting in the lotus position, but there's a bat. They're sitting on a bat. because we all needed. When I started explaining to some people about the bat piece, that always threw them off. But not only is the yin yang, right? They're opposites. But when you talk about taking that stand, finding what the passion that you need, that's what we're talking about. Never talking about violence, because that's not going to get you anywhere. But it is important to know what you want and how you want it. And we've all experienced it. So I'm sure when you come on the show, we'll talk about maybe some of the challenges that brought you to where you are, to your greatness, and what has brought you there. And that's the value of us all. That's the clan and tribe that I want to create, is having everybody on and say, hey, this has happened to me also. It doesn't have to be the worst case scenario, but it's something that's distracted you at some point, or you needed that GPS to find the right way home again. And that's what we do, is bringing everybody home.
Yeah, no, that's so good. It's, in some ways, I just realized this about the bat and about this show, because over my shoulder is the icon, the logo for one sharp sword. And people could go, well, a sword is pretty violent. And the truth about a sword is you never draw it unless you intend to use it. And the idea is it never gets drawn, right? The idea is that there's power that doesn't ever need to be expressed in that way. That said, when it's drawn, use it correctly. And one sharp sword is so much more powerful than 1,000 dull blades. And so this really is about cutting through to what matters most. So knowing what you want, for you, bring a bat, peace, love, and bring a bat. Knowing what you want, having
what I do is, so similarly, with the bring a bat, I just say find your sweet spot, right? So
Nice.
whatever that means to you, that's what it is. Anybody who's swung a bat and hit that ball, guess what? There's a sweet spot. There's that one magic swing that you just feel it's all right. It's all good. And that's why as part of that, we plant magic seeds and all these things, because it's information. Like, even on your show, you might hear it once and then you're like, oh, having a conversation with somebody else, you're like, I heard on Dr. Pernell's show this great piece. Those are the seeds you want to nurture and plant and continue to grow.
Perfect. Do you want to talk about your book? You have The Power of Proximity.
Yeah. So last year, I assisted during a book about the power of proximity with Dr. Greg Reed and some others. And it was talking about the Phoenix moment when he had seen me on stage, and how the part of the book is about how we help people, how we move along by who we meet, who we surround ourselves with, and where our powers are. Our powers are to the proximity of people who gather amongst ourselves, right? So you and I met, and we become powerful together because you shared knowledge with me, I share knowledge with you, and that's what it is. which is part of my passion as well. Because one of the other things that I'm rolling out this year is my charity piece. This I love to do charity work is Goons for Good, where I go, hey, I know a guy, because as you hear the New York accent. But the thing is that I do know a guy. So if you're looking for certain things and I'm not the expert in that particular area, then guess what? I know a guy, or there might be somebody who worked better with you than I do because we just mesh. That's the power of proximity. That's the advantage of knowing the right people. It's not just knowing somebody. It's actually saying, hey, give me a second. I'm going to make a phone call. It's being able to say all the things that need to be said, but by knowing a person. So it's not only knowing a guy, but that's what it used to be, right? In the old 1950s movies,
Hey, I
it's,
know a guy,
hey,
right?
come over here. Again, I have the Brooklyn accent, so come over here. I know a guy.
Nice. I love that. So power of proximity is not about where you are, but about who you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah.
And there was a cartoon, and I don't remember the name of it. With our powers combined, and they're like the
Wonder Twin powers, right?
That's the one. Okay.
Yep, Wonder
Right.
Twin powers.
So that's it. It's like with your powers combined, you actually create more power. You create more effectiveness, and it's with our powers combined. I always say, the idea of a mastermind, for example, right? So I run the stuckattetop.com, Stuck at the Top Mastermind, where it's a breakthrough retreat. And the idea is, if I have an apple and you have an apple and we trade apples, or $1 and $1 and we trade dollars, right? If we trade, then we each still have an apple, or we each still have $1. But if I have an idea and you have an idea and we trade ideas, now we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 100 different ideas that come just from sharing that. And it's like, have you thought about this? Well, what about that? Well, I know a guy, right? And it's like, bang, all of a sudden, the power of proximity. Who are you around that is elevating you, and who are you elevating in the process? All part of it. Love that.
Rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Mm-hmm.
JFK is quoted as saying that. But that's what I talk about on the podcast, also about having that magic garden and planting the seeds. Magic garden has a little special meaning for me because I don't know I think it was just local, but there used to be this kids program called the Magic Garden. And one of the women who was part, the host lived in my neighborhood. So we'd always hear her, sitting around playing a guitar, and Magic Garden was like so tied to us. But that's what, when I started thinking about all these seeds and growing, that's what we do. When we plant, I don't know if you have a garden in your home, you might plant 30 seeds and you don't get 30 plants or 30 flowers. You get a couple, even though you're nurturing them, some will be nurtured. And that's that power to proximity is, what are you nurturing and how are you nurturing it?
It's awesome. And you have to weed it and attend to it and all that stuff, right? So, yep.
You can't rely on just good old sun. You need to keep feeding it and find that resilience for the flower, right?
That's right. It's what you bring to it.
It rise tall.
Life. That's right. Dave, we've covered a lot in a short amount of time. Is there anything else that you want to cover, or do you want to tell people how to reach you?
Yeah. So this week, I don't know when the recording is going to come out. So I'd like you to check out Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat, because I'm going to be launching the podcast this week. I have a couple of episodes I recorded over this weekend. That would be really appreciative to do that. And there'll be a lot of things on Facebook. You can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I just joined Clubhouse, which has been interesting, as well as check out my website, www.davidchemetzky.com.
And just so people know how to spell it, it's David, but it's
CHEMETZKY. Or you can email me on the path ny @gmail.com.
All right. And I'll have those links on the path ny@gmail.com. David Chemetzky, CHAMETZKY.com. Find him on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Clubhouse, and all those other places. And if people are interested, you're giving you're giving away the success profiles and success piece if people reach out to you. So that's awesome. Cool. Any closing words for the audience?
Just keep rising. I mean, that's it. Find the R in your heart and just be resilient. Know that no matter how bad things get, if you take that pause, you'll find the resiliency. You can rise ahead. And if not, reach out. I'm sure that Dr. Wayne can assist you to find some resiliency. I know I can assist some resiliency. And I'd love to just have communications.
That's awesome. That's another R word. Reach out. Reach out. Good. So this is about rise. Very good. Dave Chemetzky, thank you so much for joining me. This is One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most.